In my particular line of work, as you might imagine, I get to hear a lot of interesting stories of near-death experiences, of dreams and visions, of miracles and wonders. When people have these kinds of direct experiences of the presence of God, when the Lord speaks and we listen, those aren't the kind of stories that we're inclined to share in casual conversation at work over the water cooler. I'm honored when people trust me with those stories, when you have trusted me with those stories. So my examples are from other times and places. I can't put my finger on it, she said, but I just know I'm being led to a new place, to a new job, that some big change is coming. Do you think I'm crazy? Or the daughter says to me about her father, the doctor is giving him 6 months to live. But I don't know, Bryn. I look into his face and there's a glow about it. It's like he's got one foot in this world and another foot in the next one. There's a certain light in the room. Do you think I'm crazy? Or this one, my personal favorite. I had a dream last night, he said to me. And my late wife came to me. Plain as I'm speaking to you now, she stood there and she said to me, honey, it's time to move. It's time to go into assisted living. What do you think I should do? And after I finished laughing, I said, you know, there are great prophets from years past, preachers in seminaries around the world who would give their lives for a message as clear as that one. I think you should move to assisted living. I love these stories of our faith. But what amuses me even more is these lines from 1 Samuel. What did he say? The word of the Lord was rare in those days. Visions were not widespread. That was 3,000 years ago, back in Bible times. Even back then, when God acted in the world, when God spoke out loud, people thought it was a little weird. That's why it took poor Samuel 3 times to get Eli to catch on that God was still speaking. Well, that description of how we live in times when visions and voices from God were not widespread could just as well describe the last 50 years of life in the United States, in towns like Brookfield or where I grew up in Greensboro, North Carolina. Most of us never go to bed at night expecting God to speak to us in the dark. Our sons and daughters don't so much seek visions to know God's will for their lives as consult their high school guidance counselor or maybe a friend on Facebook. But I received my first call into ministry in the dark, in the early dawn hours one summer morning when I was 11, much like the kid Samuel. And I'll share that story with you, I'm sure, some other time, but the point I want to make is that growing up in a church like ours, this church here, a big family-friendly, mainline Congregational church, no one had ever tuned my ears to hear God's voice. so I didn't speak a word of my vision to anyone. In my Sunday school, I had learned a lot about God, about the Bible, but I hadn't really come to know God or to know that God knew me. I love that the psalmist uses that wonderful Hebrew word, yada, to talk about God knowing us in the biblical sense. That's the kind of pillow talk we're called to have with our beloved. But nobody taught me to pray like that when I was a kid. I started to learn more about it when I was in my 20s, as God continued to hunt me down and herd me into seminary. It was then that I came to really love these words from Psalm 139. Where can I go from your spirit? Or where can I flee from your presence? If I take the wings of the morning and fly to the farthest side of the sea, even there your hand shall lead me, and your right hand shall hold me. It's funny, but those verses gave me a lot of comfort on the plane when I was 25, when I was moving to California, because I felt very alone that day with just my suitcases and a cat in a cat carrier to keep me company. I even had a terrible fear of flying back then, so as I gripped the armrests and, you pull slightly up, keeps you in the air. I remember that white-knuckled feeling and praying that psalm to myself. It's ironic that I got so much comfort from knowing that God was holding me, because like poor Jonah, I was doing my utmost to run away from God and God's call to ministry. I was leaving the Bible Belt for the Barbary Coast on the uttermost shore of the sea. And as you know, San Francisco is much better known for its sex and comedy clubs in North Beach, or the drugs and counterculture and rock and roll of Haight-Ashbury, than for its Congregational church. My bus on the way to work passed that church every morning downtown, but I didn't get off at that stop. Even though I knew this psalm by heart, I was pretty sure that God wouldn't be able to find me in San Francisco. But it didn't take too long until I came to understand what the psalmist meant when he said to God, "You hem me in behind and before. You lay your hand upon me." It seemed that everywhere I turned, God cut me off at the pass. Every time I made plans, God seemed to have other plans. And in those years, I came to understand that if you really, really want to make God laugh, make your plans. After only 3 months after I moved to San Francisco and started at the American Conservatory Theater, they had a big blow up and all the teachers quit, or half of them quit and started a new school. So they had to release our incoming class, let us go, the idea we might stay around and re-audition the next fall. I didn't quite know what to do about that, having left a good job and everything behind. So I took myself to church that year for my birthday. And the weirdest thing happened. During the announcements, one of the pastors mentioned that it was his birthday. And it was the other pastor's birthday too. I knew I was on to God. I mean, this clearly was a way to make me have to go through the line and shake their hand and say, "Guess what? It's my birthday too." But I was not to be fooled or tricked that way. I took the side exit.